The little girl didn't know her life was being priced at $5,000, but everyone else in the room did. The man with the envelope knew. The aunt, counting her breaths, knew. Only Nora Hayes, 6 years old, clutching a threadbare stuffed rabbit missing an eye, stood barefoot on the sticky motel carpet, completely unaware she had already been traded. The Ridgepoint Motel wasn't a place for children. It wasn't a place for hope. It was where people came to disappear, either themselves or someone else. Nora stood in the doorway, shivering in the cold air leaking from the rattling AC unit. Her Aunt Ramona kept one hand on her shoulder, nails digging in just enough to hurt, not enough to leave bruises. "Don't start crying," Ramona whispered sharply. "You ruin everything when you cry." Nora tried to swallow the knot in her throat, but tears built anyway. She rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand, terrified of disappointing the only adult she had left in the world. Ramona stepped inside first, the metal door groaning behind her. The room smelled like cigarettes and wet carpet. A lamp flickered beside a bed with sunken springs, and there, sitting on the edge of the mattress, was the stranger. He didn't smile when he saw Nora. He smirked, a long, slow curl of his lips like he'd been waiting for this moment. "She's smaller than I expected," he said, voice gravelly. Ramona's hand tightened around Nora's shoulder. "She eats like a bird, always has." Nora didn't understand why her aunt was talking about her like she wasn't there, like she wasn't a person, like she wasn't family. The man reached beside him and lifted an envelope. Thick, crisp, heavy. Nora didn't know what $5,000 looked like, but she knew what desperation looked like. She'd seen it in Ramona's eyes every day for months. "You brought the papers?" the man asked. Ramona nodded and pulled out a folded sheet from her purse. Not real forms, not legal, just a slanted handwritten temporary guardianship consent scribbled in blue pen. Ramona smoothed her blouse, pretending to be calm, but her voice trembled when she spoke. "This makes it official." Official. As if a child's life could be made official with a pen stolen from a gas station counter. Nora's breathing quickened. She tugged lightly on Ramona's sleeve. "Auntie, what's going on?" Ramona didn't look at her. She never looked at her when she was about to do something unforgivable. "Nothing you need to worry about," she said flatly. Nora took a step back. The stranger's eyes followed her like a predator watching a trapped animal. "You said she was quiet," he murmured. "She is," Ramona snapped. "Aren't you, Nora?" Nora nodded, because that's what good girls do when they're scared. But fear makes the truth louder. Her voice cracked anyway. "Auntie, I want to go home." Ramona let out a long, irritated sigh and finally crouched in front of her. For a moment, Nora's heart lifted, thinking her aunt might be soft again, the way she was before the late-night calls, before the overdue bills, before the shouting. But Ramona's face was brittle, unmoving. "Nora," she said, gripping the child's chin between cold fingers, "you need to listen to me very carefully." Nora froze. "You're going to stay with this man for a while. He's going to take good care of you, better than I ever could." Nora shook her head quickly, panic setting in. No, please, I'll be good, I promise. Please don't make me—" Ramona's voice dropped to a whisper, one that cut more than it comforted. "You always say that, and it never changes anything." The stranger chuckled under his breath. Ramona stood up, grabbed Nora by the upper arm, and shoved her forward. Nora fell into the stranger's reach. His fingers wrapped around her small wrist like a clamp. She screamed, a sound too sharp, too raw, too honest for a place like this. The stranger didn't flinch. Ramona didn't turn around. She was busy counting the money. 500, 1,000, 3,000, 5,000. Her breathing steadied with each stack she touched. Nora's screams cracked like glass. The stranger yanked her closer. Ramona finally walked to the door. Nora's stuffed rabbit slipped from her arms and fell onto the dirty carpet. She lunged for it, but the man held her back easily. "Auntie!" Nora sobbed. "Please, please, don't leave me!" Ramona paused at the doorway. The girl's screams echoed off the stained walls. For a single second, Ramona's jaw clenched, not out of guilt, but irritation. She didn't turn around. She didn't say goodbye. She only muttered, "Stop being dramatic," under her breath. Then stepped outside. Nora's knees buckled. She tried to run toward her aunt, but the stranger locked the door behind her. The sound of the deadbolt sliding shut felt like the end of her world. Nora fell against the door, pounding with tiny fists, voice hoarse. "Auntie, Auntie, come back! I'll be good, I swear, please!" Ramona's heels clicked across the parking lot, quick, relieved steps. She got into her car, put the money on the passenger seat, started the engine, drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. Inside room 8, the stranger leaned down beside Nora. "You're mine now," he said. Nora screamed until her voice broke. But somewhere across the city, a billionaire philanthropist's phone vibrated with a message that would change everything. Little girl was sold today. Ridgepoint Motel, room 8. If anyone can save her, it's you. Elias Ward rose from his chair, eyes cold with fury. He grabbed his keys and whispered, "I'm coming." Elias Ward had read thousands of messages in his lifetime. Business proposals, charity requests, political invitations, desperate pleas, but none froze his blood the way this one did. A little girl was sold today. Ridgepoint Motel, room 8. If anyone can save her, it's you. There was no sender name, no number, no traceable metadata. Whoever sent it knew exactly how to hide and exactly whom to contact. Elias stared at the message, jaw tightening. He reread it once, then again, then a third time. Something about the way it was phrased, cold, direct, urgent, told him this wasn't a prank. This was a warning, a challenge, a last chance. He snatched his coat from the back of his chair and strode toward the door of his penthouse office. His assistant, Melissa, stood up instantly. "Mr. Ward, you have a board meeting in 12 minutes. "Cancel it?" She blinked. "All of it? The investors flew in from—" "I said cancel it." The tone of his voice made her sit back down slowly. Elias wasn't a man who raised his voice. He didn't need to. But something in his eyes, something sharp, merciless, unyielding, told her a line had been crossed he could not ignore. "Should I arrange security?" she asked. "No," he brushed past her. "This is something I do myself." 4 years ago, Elias lost funding for an entire child safety initiative because investors didn't want dark stories tied to the Sterling Foundation's image. 3 years ago, he personally funded a missing child database after a kidnapped boy was found too late. 2 years ago, he helped reform interstate trafficking laws. 1 year ago, he attended the funeral of a girl whose family never received justice. He remembered her small pink shoes in the coffin more vividly than anything else. Ever since then, a quiet fury lived inside him. He never forgot. He never forgave. He never let a child slip into darkness without burning the world trying to reach them. This anonymous message wasn't going to be ignored. Not by him. The elevator doors hadn't even closed when Elias dialed the number of his private investigator. It rang once, then a groggy voice answered, "It's midnight, Ward." "I need a trace," Elias said, fast. "On what?" "A little girl, Nora Hayes, Ridgepoint Motel, room 8, possible sale." The investigator swore under his breath. "That motel's a graveyard. Cops avoid it. Locals pretend it doesn't exist." "Not tonight," Elias said. "You think it's legit?" "I think it's happening. Right now." There was a rustle of sheets as the PI sat up. "All right, I'm at my computer. Give me 5 minutes. 3, Elias said, stepping into the parking garage. He got into his armored black SUV and slammed the door shut. The engine ignited like a predator waking, purring low and lethal. He sped out of the garage before the gate even finished rising. The PI called back 2 minutes later. "Found something. There's a CPS flag on the name Nora Hayes." "What kind of flag?" "Multiple reports from neighbors. Neglect, bruises, being left alone for hours. Nothing ever stuck. Aunt Ramona Hayes, mid-30s, has custody." "What about the parents?" "Mother deceased. Father disappeared last year. Last known location, out of state. No contact since." Elias clenched the steering wheel. "This kid had nobody watching," the PI continued. "Easy target. How old is she?" 6. The number hit Elias in the chest. 6. 6-year-olds were supposed to have crayons, not price tags. "What about the aunt?" Elias asked. "Financially drowning, debt collectors, payday loans, eviction notices." "So she sold the girl." "It wouldn't be the first time someone did that for cash, Elias." Elias muted the microphone quickly, because the sound that came out of him wasn't something the PI needed to hear. A low, furious exhale, the kind of breath he only released when something broke inside him. When he unmuted, his voice was steady again, but colder. "I'm 10 minutes away from Ridgepoint." "Go in carefully," the PI warned. "People disappear out there." "I'm not people," Elias replied. And he wasn't. He was a man with too much money, too much influence, and too much unresolved rage toward anyone who harmed children. And he was going to that motel with every intention of tearing open whatever pit this child had been thrown into. The Ridgepoint Motel sat at the edge of the city like a forgotten wound. Run down, half the bulbs in the sign dead, doors rusted, parking lot full of cars that looked like they'd seen too many crimes. Elias pulled in fast, scanning every shadow, every window. A drunk man stumbled across the lot and disappeared behind the vending machines. 2 women smoked under a stairway, eyeing him suspiciously. A man with a hoodie pulled up over his face, leaned against a railing, staring too long. Something was wrong here. Something lived here. Something ugly. Elias walked straight toward room 8. His footsteps quickened. He approached the door, put his hand on the knob, twisted, unlocked. He pushed it open and froze. The room was empty, the bed unmade, the sheets damp like a child had cried into them. A stuffed rabbit lay crushed on the woof. Floor, one ear torn. Nora's. He crouched down and picked it up gently. The small toy was still warm. She had been here minutes ago. Minutes. He scanned the room. There was no sign of the buyer, no girl, no aunt. And then Elias saw it. Outside the window, tire tracks, fresh. A car had sped out of the lot recently. Too recently. His jaw tightened, his pulse quickened, his blood went cold. He stood up and whispered to the empty room, "Hold on, Nora, I'm coming." Then he stormed out of the motel, and the hunt began. The Ridgepoint Motel looked even worse up close. The peeling paint, the broken vending machine, the sagging roof held up by rusted beams, a place where screams didn't echo, they dissolved. Elias parked crookedly in front of room 8, engine still running, headlights slicing through the darkness like a blade. He stepped out with the stuffed rabbit in his hand, its fur still warm from Nora's grip. He wasn't breathing hard, but something inside him was sprinting. He scanned the parking lot, eyes sharp, slicing through every shadow. He noticed everything. A woman peeking from behind a curtain. A man sitting in a truck with the engine idling too long. A figure on the second-floor balcony pacing, nervous. Predators and ghosts. This motel collected both. Elias walked back to the door of room 8 and looked again. The bed was bent out of shape, like someone had grabbed a child off it. The carpet fibers still flattened where tiny knees had been pressed. The window was smudged with small, frantic fingerprints. Then he saw it. A tiny pink hair clip on the windowsill. It wasn't damaged. It wasn't dropped carelessly. It was placed, like a breadcrumb. A silent cry for help from a child who wasn't even old enough to know what a clue was. Elias picked it up gently, pocketing it. Then the sound hit him, faint but real. A car engine in the distance, fast, too fast. He turned his head sharply. Down the hill beside the motel, taillights flashed, a dark sedan accelerating onto a side road. "Damn it," Elias muttered, sprinting back to his SUV. He jumped in, slammed the door, tore out of the parking lot, gravel exploding beneath the tires. The sedan was gone, already swallowed by the night, but Elias wasn't guessing where it went. He had a PI feeding him camera data in real time. He hit the Bluetooth button. "They're gone," Elias said, voice cold. "Find them." The PI's keys clacked rapidly. "Hold on, checking traffic cams. Ridgepoint doesn't have cameras, but the exit road does." Silence. Then, got something. Dark blue sedan, no plates visible, heading west on Highway 9. Passengers small, could be Nora. Elias floored the accelerator. Traffic lights smeared across his windshield as he sped through empty intersections, the city falling behind him as the road opened into the outskirts. "She's in that car," Elias said. Not a question, a fact. "Most likely," the PI said. "But Elias, something else is off." "What?" "There's no matching report for a stranger with her description in the area. This guy wasn't local. This was pre-planned." "So Ramona knew him?" "No, it's deeper. The motel owner reported similar drop-offs last year, children showing up, disappearing hours later." Elias gripped the steering wheel so tight it creaked. "How many?" he demanded. "3 confirmed, probably more." Elias's voice dropped into something dark. "I'll deal with him too." 10 minutes later, Elias reached a gas station near an intersection where the PI said the sedan was last seen. He jumped out of his SUV and approached the clerk behind the counter. The clerk froze. He recognized the billionaire instantly. "Did you see a dark blue sedan, a man with a little girl?" Elias asked. The clerk hesitated too long. Elias stepped closer. "Think very carefully. A child's life is at stake." The clerk swallowed hard and pointed shakily. I didn't want trouble. But yeah, he stopped for gas. The little girl, she looked sick, crying. He told her to shut up." "Which direction?" The clerk pointed toward a narrow rural road leading into forest and farmland. Elias ran back to his SUV. He didn't have confirmation. He didn't have certainty. But he had instinct. And instinct told him that road was where nightmares drove. Before turning, he made one more stop. He circled back to the motel, because something wasn't sitting right. When he slammed his door shut and walked toward the office, the motel owner shut the blinds, too fast, too guilty. Elias didn't knock. He pushed the door open with enough force that the bell above it screeched. The motel owner, a thin man with a limp and nicotine-stained fingers, stiffened behind the counter. You can't just—" Elias held up Nora's stuffed rabbit. "This was left in room 8. Start talking." The owner swallowed loudly. I don't know what you mean." "Try again," Elias said, stepping closer. "This is a 6-year-old's toy. She was taken from here tonight. You opened the door, you handed over the key. You watched." The owner trembled. "Look, man, I don't get into people's business. You get into it now." Elias's voice was quiet, but it hit like a hammer. The owner looked at the floor, defeated. "Ramona, she's been coming here for months, meeting people, different ones, sometimes alone, sometimes with kids." Elias's jaw clenched. "Kids?" he repeated. The man nodded miserably. "Not always the same ones. I didn't want to know. Nobody here wants to know anything." "Tonight?" Elias said. "What did you see?" The owner wiped his forehead. "Ramona arrived with the girl. The man came later. He paid her. She left. She's been desperate for cash, gambling, debts, everything." Elias was stone still. "Did she look guilty?" he asked. "No," the owner whispered. "She looked relieved." Elias closed his eyes for half a second, not long enough to lose momentum, but long enough to steady the explosion inside him. He opened them again, gaze sharp enough to cut steel. "Give me everything," he said. "Descriptions, cars, times, any names she used." The owner scribbled frantically, pushing a paper toward him. Elias took it, turned, and walked out with purpose in his step and fury in his chest. As he reached his SUV, another call came in. The PI's voice was rushed. "Elias, we just picked up the sedan again, heading into abandoned farmland off Aspen Road. No lights, no stops." Elias started the engine. "I'm going," he said. "Be careful," the PI warned. "You're walking into a den." Elias shifted into drive, eyes cold. "Then I'll tear it open." He sped into the darkness, tires screeching as the motel shrank behind him. At that same moment, miles away in the backseat of a moving sedan, Nora pressed her palms against the window, watching the lights disappear. She whispered into the night, "Please, someone, find me." And Elias Ward, following tire tracks into the wilderness, whispered back as he gripped the wheel, "I will." The road narrowed into darkness as Elias followed the PI's directions. The city lights were gone now. All that remained was an open stretch of rural highway bordered by dead cornfields and rotting wooden fences. His high-beam headlights sliced through the night, illuminating dust, gravel, and the long, lonely path the kidnapper took. The PI's voice crackled through the speaker. "I've traced the sedan through 3 traffic cameras, all old feeds but good enough. Tell me. Camera 1, gas station at 11:02 p.m. You just missed them by minutes." Elias pressed harder on the accelerator. Minutes in a case like this felt like years. Camera 2, Highway 9 westbound ramp. The car was traveling fast with no headlights. That's deliberate," Elias said. "He didn't want attention." Camera 3, Aspen Road exit, rural, leads to abandoned farmland. Send me coordinates. It's already in your GPS. Elias checked the screen briefly. A red pin blinked in the center of a huge gray patch, vast empty land. "How many structures out there?" Elias asked. 3 old farmhouses, the PI replied. "Condemned. No electricity. Nearest neighbor is 2 miles away." Elias's grip tightened. That kind of isolation wasn't random. It was chosen. 5 minutes later, the road turned from asphalt to gravel. Dust clouded behind Elias's SUV, and the dry grass on both sides trembled as wind swept across the fields. Nora was somewhere out here, alone, terrified, in the hands of someone who saw her as currency. His chest tightened at the thought he wouldn't fail her. He couldn't. The PI's voice sounded again. "One more thing, Elias." "What?" The guy driving the sedan. His face was partially visible on camera 1. It matched someone in our old case files. Elias's heart thudded once, hard. "Who?" "Name: Franklin Moss. Alias: Frank. Past record: child endangerment, illegal guardianship transfers, and suspected involvement in 3 disappearances." Elias's blood ran cold. "He's a seller," Elias said, "not a buyer." "Correct. Which means whoever wanted Nora, he was delivering her." Elias's jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. If Nora wasn't with Frank anymore, that meant she was being handed off again. A chain of hands, each one worse than the last. "How much time do I have?" Elias asked quietly. "Hard to say," the PI answered. "You're running against a clock you can't see." Elias didn't respond. He pressed the accelerator even harder. The road took a sharp turn, revealing a cluster of abandoned buildings in the distance. Silhouettes of rotting barns and a large farmhouse loomed against the moonlight. His GPS blinked. "You have arrived." Elias killed the headlights immediately. Darkness swallowed the SUV. He didn't want to announce his presence. He parked behind a broken tractor, stepping out silently. The wind rattled the old barn doors, making them creak like ghosts whispering secrets. The PI stayed on the line. "Elias, don't go in alone." "I am alone," Elias said, "and I'm not waiting." He approached the farmhouse cautiously, staying low, eyes scanning every window, every shadow. Then he saw it. Tire tracks, fresh, deep, heading straight toward the farmhouse. He followed them until they stopped near the front porch, and next to them, a small piece of torn pink fabric, silky, child-sized, Nora's dress. His chest tightened with fury and urgency. "Nora's here," Elias whispered. "Don't take risks," the PI warned. But Elias was already moving. He reached the front porch. The wooden boards creaked loudly under his weight, echoing into the empty darkness beyond. He tried the front door. Locked. He circled. Around to the back. A broken window, glass scattered inward. Someone had climbed in, someone small. He crouched down, inspecting the floor inside. Dust, old leaves, and tiny footprints, feet that belonged to a terrified child trying to escape. He sucked in a breath. She tried to run. She tried her hardest, but her footprints circled back toward the stairs, then abruptly stopped. Elias felt his stomach drop. Something dragged her. He followed the drag marks to a small room in the back of the house. The door was slightly open. He pushed it slowly. Inside was a single chair, a coil of duct tape, a child's bracelet on the floor, pink with glittery beads, broken. He picked it up. His hand shook. He closed his eyes briefly, steadying the storm inside him. She wasn't hurt. She couldn't be hurt. Not yet. Not if he moved now. A noise broke the silence, the creak of floorboards upstairs. Elias froze. His eyes snapped upward. Someone was still in the house. He stepped backward, staying in the shadows, his breathing controlled and quiet. He moved toward the staircase on silent feet. Another creak. A faint voice. A man's voice. Then, a sound like a child whimpering. Nora. Elias's pulse exploded. The PI spoke urgently through the earpiece. "Elias, wait for backup!" But Elias was already climbing the stairs. Each step creaked under his weight, the old wood groaning. Elias paused on the landing, listening. The voice grew clearer. "Stop crying. I haven't even done anything yet." Elias's vision blurred with rage. He moved toward the farthest room, the only one with light flickering under the door. He reached for the doorknob, took a slow, controlled breath, and turned it. The door swung open, and the rescue would begin. The room smelled of mildew, rotten wood, and fear. A single lantern flickered from a hook in the ceiling, casting jagged shadows over peeling wallpaper and exposed beams. The air felt cold, not from temperature, but from the kind of silence that eats sound before it escapes. And in the center of that silence was Nora. She sat tied to a chair, wrists bound with duct tape so tight the skin beneath it looked red and raw. Her ankles were tied to the chair legs, her tiny sneakers touching nothing. Her stuffed rabbit lay on the floor beside her, one ear bent, its body covered in dust. Nora's chest shook with tiny broken sobs. Her hair was messy, sticking to her tear-streaked face. Her voice trembled. "Please, please let me go. I didn't do anything." Elias stepped into the doorway slowly, carefully. "Nora," he said softly. Her head snapped up. Her eyes, wide, terrified, glistening with tears, met his. For a moment, she didn't breathe, didn't move, didn't blink. Then her trembling lips parted. "You came." The words nearly brought Elias to his knees. "Yes," he whispered. "I came for you." He crossed the room in 3 quick, quiet steps, kneeling in front of her. His hands shook as he touched the duct tape, not from fear, but from rage. "You're safe now," he said, tearing at the tape gently. "I've got you." Nora flinched when the tape tugged her skin, but she didn't cry out. She was too exhausted, too defeated. Her voice was barely a whisper. He said someone else was coming. Someone worse. He said I'd never see sunlight again. Elias felt his breath burn in his lungs. "I'm getting you out of here before he ever touches you again." He peeled the tape from her wrists, careful not to hurt her. Nora winced once, then whimpered softly. "You're doing great, sweetheart," he murmured. "Just hold on." He slid his arms beneath her and lifted her gently. She was light, too light. She buried her face into his shirt, gripping the fabric with trembling fingers. "Please don't leave me. Please don't let him come back." "I won't," Elias said. "I'm right here." But the moment the words left his mouth, a floorboard creaked in the hallway. Elias froze. Nora stiffened in his arms, tiny fingers squeezing tighter. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. A voice followed, the same voice Nora had been hearing for hours. Well, what do we have here?" Elias turned sharply. Frank Moss stepped into view, blocking the doorway. Unshaven, greasy hair, pale eyes too hungry, too familiar with cruelty. He looked at Elias with a smirk. "You Ward?" Elias didn't answer. Frank chuckled. "Lucky me. Higher bidder than I expected." Elias shifted Nora onto his hip protectively. "What did you do to her?" Frank rolled his shoulders relaxedly, as if they were discussing the weather. "Nothing yet, but she would have fetched me double in 2 hours. Overseas money is clean. People don't ask questions." Nora shuddered violently, burying her face deeper. Elias's voice turned razor sharp. "You're not taking her anywhere." Frank stepped forward, casual, confident, a man who believed he owned the situation. "You got here faster than I planned," he said. "Aunt said you'd show interest. Didn't know she meant this kind." He laughed. "Maybe you want the kid too. Everyone wants what's rare. 6-year-olds with no one looking? That's money, right there." Elias's skin crawled. He slowly reached into his pocket, not for a weapon, but for his phone. He hit record. Frank noticed and smirked. "Really? You think that scares me?" "No," Elias said, "but it will bury you." Frank stepped closer. "Put the kid down, or this goes badly." Elias positioned Nora behind his back, shielding her completely. "Take one more step," Elias said quietly, "and I swear you won't reach her." Frank paused. Elias wasn't armed, but he didn't need to be. There was something deadly in the billionaire's eyes, something unpredictable, something that made Frank hesitate, and then Frank smiled again. "This won't end the way you think." He lunged forward, not at Elias, at Nora. Elias moved too fast for thought. He blocked Frank's arm with one hand, shoved him backward with the other, and positioned himself like a shield over Nora. Frank stumbled, knocking into a table. The lantern swung violently, shadows tearing across the walls. Elias didn't attack, didn't escalate. He played the only role that mattered, protector. "Stay behind me," he whispered to Nora. She nodded, trembling so hard her teeth clicked. Frank wiped his mouth, furious. "You shouldn't have come here alone." "I'm never alone," Elias said, and right on cue, sirens wailed in the distance. Frank's face twisted. Elias switched his phone screen, showing the recording, Frank admitting the sale, the buyer, the plan. "Game's over," Elias said coldly. Frank bolted for the back door. Elias didn't chase him, not yet. He turned to Nora first. "You okay?" She nodded weakly, though her body shook. "Come here," he murmured, lifting her again. Only once she was safe in his arms did Elias step outside. Flashlights danced across the field as police cars skidded to a stop in front of the farmhouse. Officers rushed in, guns drawn but controlled. "Ward, you called this in?" they shouted. "Yes," Elias said. "The man ran out the back. He admitted everything. Get him before he finds another child." 3 officers sprinted into the dark after Frank. Elias held Nora tighter. Her small voice trembled against his shoulder. "Don't let him take me again." Elias closed his eyes for a moment, breath trembling. He never will. Police ran past them, lights slicing the night open. Nora's tears soaked into Elias's shirt, and for the first time since she was sold like currency, she allowed herself to believe. She was no longer alone. Ramona Hayes did not cry when they arrested her. She didn't scream. She didn't fall apart. She didn't even look surprised. When the handcuffs clicked around her wrists and the officers pushed her against the hood of the police car outside her crumbling apartment building, she looked almost offended, as if the world owed her an apology. Elias watched from a distance, Nora wrapped in a blanket in his arms. He didn't let the child see Ramona, didn't let her hear the woman's voice again. Nora had already endured enough. Hearing Ramona's justifications would shatter what little safety she'd gained in the past hours. But Elias needed answers. He needed to understand, because no amount of money, desperation, or addiction could explain what Ramona had done, not the way she had done it. So while officers placed her in the back of the cruiser, Elias stepped forward. "Why did you do it?" he asked. Ramona looked up sharply, annoyed rather than remorseful. "Do what?" she spat. "You people act like I drowned a puppy." Elias's jaw tightened. "You sold a 6-year-old child." Ramona rolled her eyes. "She's dramatic. She'll get over it." Elias had to restrain the urge to step back in disbelief. Her tone was so casual, so dismissive, that for a moment he wondered if she even understood what she had done. But Ramona understood perfectly. She just didn't care. Hours later, at the station, Elias was given access to her recorded statement. The detective pressed play. Ramona sat on the other side of the table in the video, leaning back in her chair like she was bored. Her hair was messy, makeup smudged, but her confidence was disgustingly intact. "I didn't kidnap anyone," she said. "I was her guardian. I can give her to whoever I want." "Ramona," the detective said, "you signed a forged guardianship transfer to a man with a criminal record." Ramona shrugged. "And he paid cash, good money. I deserved something." "Deserved?" "Yes," she snapped, leaning forward. "I raised her, I fed her, I clothed her. I put a damn roof over her head for 2 years. Nobody helped me, not once." "You did it for money?" Ramona's laugh filled the room, bitter, sharp. "Oh, honey, if this was about money, I would have pawned my jewelry and hustled like everyone else. No." She leaned back and crossed her arms. "I did it because I wanted her gone." Elias felt something cold coil in his stomach. The detective hesitated. "Why? She's just a child," Ramona scoffed. "Exactly. A child that wasn't mine. A child I never asked for. A child my sister dumped on me when she died, like a consolation prize." Her voice dripped with resentment. "You want to know the truth? Nora ruined my life, ruined my relationships, ruined my peace, ruined every chance I had at starting fresh." Elias's fingers curled into fists. Ramona kept talking, unbothered. "People like you don't understand what it's like to be stuck with somebody else's kid. I couldn't date because men don't want some sad little orphan tagging along like a stray cat. I couldn't move out of this dump. Because every penny went to food and clothes for her. I couldn't have a life," she pointed to her own chest. "I deserved a life." "And Nora?" the detective asked quietly. Ramona shrugged. She'd survive. Kids survive anything. "Selling her to a stranger?" the detective pressed. Ramona rolled her eyes. "He promised he'd take care of her, better than I ever could. Honestly, she should be grateful." Elias felt something break inside him, something that had been cracked for years but never fully shattered until now. Ramona wasn't desperate. She wasn't frightened. She wasn't trapped. She was selfish, monstrously, brutally selfish. Narcissistic enough to believe she was the victim, egotistical enough to believe Nora owed her gratitude. detached enough to trade a child for freedom like she was selling a piece of furniture. The detective leaned forward. You realize you might face decades in prison. Ramona's response was chilling. What for? Getting rid of a burden? Everyone judges, but nobody wants to raise someone else's kid. At least I was honest about it. Honest, as if that word belonged anywhere near her mouth. The detective shut off the recorder. Elias stood there in silence for several seconds, the audio replaying in his mind. Ramona's cold tone, her hatred, her entitlement. He had seen people like her before, people who believed the universe owed them comfort, and anyone who threatened that comfort became disposable. But hearing it directed at a child, a trembling, gentle little girl who clung to a stuffed rabbit when she was scared, made the rage inside him simmer into something dangerous. She can't ever see Nora again, Elias said. She won't, the detective assured him. We'll make sure of it. But Elias wasn't convinced the system could protect Nora on its own, not from Ramona's reach, not from people like the buyer, not from the network Ramona had clearly dipped her hands into, and not from Ramona's delusion that she was the one wronged. Elias exhaled slowly, the weight of everything pressing on him. Nora wasn't safe yet. She'd been rescued, but she hadn't been freed. Not truly. And Elias Ward wasn't going to let her be swallowed by another crack in the system. Not while he was still breathing. He turned toward the hallway, where Nora waited in a small interview room with a CPS worker. As he reached the door, he heard her tiny voice from inside. Is she gone? Is Auntie gone forever? Elias paused, placing a hand on the doorframe. His voice was low, steady, and filled with a promise he intended to keep. Yes, sweetheart, he whispered. She is. But the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Ramona thought being arrested was the worst thing that could happen to her. She was wrong. The worst thing was watching the life she'd clung to slip through her fingers, not because she'd been caught, but because someone far more intelligent than she had walked onto the board and turned her entire world into a trap. That someone was Elias Ward. It began the morning after her arrest. Elias sat in a glass-walled conference room inside the police station, reviewing evidence with the PI and 2 detectives. Nora was down the hall being examined by a trauma specialist, her tiny voice barely audible through the door whenever she whispered answers. Elias kept his focus steady. We have Frank Moss, the detective said, but if we want to crush this entire ring, we need the pipeline, and Ramona is connected. She'll talk, the PI added, not because she cares about Nora, because she cares about her own comfort. Elias looked at Ramona's file. Unpaid debts, gambling losses, small-time scams, forged documents, fake IDs, and buried between the lines, a list of contacts that screamed criminal enterprise. She'll talk if she thinks it benefits her, Elias replied. So we make her believe it does, he leaned forward. We stage a buyer. The detectives exchanged looks. Who? Me, Elias said. The PI raised a brow. You're going undercover as a buyer? That's a bit... It's the fastest way, Elias cut in. Ramona already sold Nora because she believed money justified anything, so we use her weakness against her. Detective Alvarez tapped a pen against the table. It's risky. She might recognize your name. Elias smirked slightly. Ramona only recognizes money. 2 hours later, the plan was in motion. Ramona sat in an interrogation room, hands cuffed to the table, staring at the wall with a look of contempt, the look of a woman who believed every inconvenience in the universe existed to personally attack her. A detective entered. Ramona, we have someone interested in speaking with you. Ramona perked up instantly. Who? My lawyer? No. Confusion flashed in her eyes, then curiosity. Then who? Behind the mirrored window on the other side of the room, Elias watched her reaction carefully. She wasn't scared. She wasn't remorseful. She was calculating. Good. She would walk right into it. The sting begins. The detective returned moments later with a folder, placing it on the table. Someone contacted us claiming you've been cooperating with him for months, he said. A buyer. Ramona's heart seemed to skip a beat. Buyer? Yes. The detective opened the folder, revealing staged documents, screenshots, messages, fake transaction logs created by Elias's PI. You've worked with him before, haven't you? The detective asked casually. Ramona's eyes narrowed. This was a test, A trap, but also an opportunity. Well, she said slowly, pushing her hair behind her ear, I've known people, done favors. I can't remember all their names. You'll remember this one, the detective said, sliding the last page across the table. A handwritten alias, Mr. Gray Buyer, high payer, no questions asked. Ramona's pulse visibly quickened. Mr. Gray, she repeated, tasting the name. He reached out to me before. Yes. Behind the mirror, Elias's jaw tightened. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think of Nora. She thought of profit. The detective leaned forward. He wants another child. Ramona's eyes lit up, a sickening glimmer. Her voice turned soft, coaxing. As long as I'm cleared, I can help him again. The detective didn't blink. We're listening. Ramona leaned in like a snake ready to strike. The kids aren't mine, she said casually. I just know where to find the ones nobody misses. Disgust washed over Elias. Ramona continued, Tell Gray I can get him another in 2 weeks. Younger, quiet, no problems. The detective stood. We'll arrange a meeting. Setting the trap. That evening, Ramona was transported under policing monitoring to a controlled environment, a rented warehouse wired with cameras, microphones, and officers hidden behind crates and vehicles. She strutted in like she owned the place. Elias watched from behind a black SUV with tinted windows, wearing a dark coat, his face partially shadowed. He wasn't here to play a role. He was here to witness the precise moment Ramona destroyed herself forever. Ramona looked around, confused. Where's Gray? A voice answered from the shadows. Right here. Elias stepped out. Ramona's breath caught. She didn't recognize him, not exactly, but she recognized wealth, the watch, the coat, the confidence. Her voice softened instantly. You must be Mr. Gray. And you must be the woman who sells children. Ramona smiled without shame. I prefer the term facilitator. Elias's lip curled slightly. You're not a facilitator. You're a parasite. Her eyes narrowed. I'll do what I need to survive. And you sell children to do it? He asked. Ramona shrugged. Survival is expensive. Kids are replaceable. There are always more. That was it. That was the confession. Elias tilted his head. And you can really get me another child in 2 weeks? She smiled brightly. I can get you one in 4 days. On cue. SWAT officers surged forward, surrounding her. Ramona paled. What is this? You tricked me. Elias stepped closer, face inches from hers. No, Ramona, he said softly. You tricked yourself. She lunged toward him, screaming incoherently, but officers restrained her easily. You ruined me, she shrieked. You ruined my life. Elias didn't blink. You sold a child for $5,000, he said. Your life was ruined long before I got here. Ramona's screams echoed across the warehouse, bouncing off the metal walls. But Elias didn't hear her anymore. He heard something else, a small voice in another room. Nora, wrapped in a blanket, whispering softly to a CPS worker. Is she gone? Elias inhaled sharply. One more time, sweetheart, he murmured under his breath. Yes, she's gone. For the first time in hours, Nora was somewhere warm, but warmth didn't mean safety. Not yet. The pediatric wing of St. Alden's Hospital smelled of antiseptic, cotton sheets, and lemon floor cleaner. Nurses moved quietly through dim hallways, their shoes whispering against polished tiles. The lights were soft, gentle, made for children afraid of the dark. But Nora wasn't afraid of the dark. She was afraid of people. She sat on the hospital bed, curled into a tiny ball beneath a white blanket, knees to her chest, arms wrapped around her stomach as if holding herself together. A monitor beeped slowly beside her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't speaking. She wasn't even blinking much, just staring at the far wall as if expecting someone to burst through it, as if someone already had. A trauma nurse approached softly. Sweetheart, do you need water? A snack? Nora didn't respond. The nurse offered a small smile, touching her shoulder gently. Nora flinched so violently the woman froze in place. Okay, she said softly. Okay, no touching, that's all right. The nurse stepped back, and that was when Elias entered the room. He didn't make noise. He didn't speak her name loudly. He didn't rush her. He stood in the doorway first, letting Nora see him from a distance, giving her space to recognize him, not as another stranger, not as a threat, but as the man who had carried her out of the dark. Nora slowly lifted her head. Her breath trembled when she saw him. "Elias," she whispered, barely audible, as if saying his name might shatter something fragile inside her. He approached the bed slowly, like someone approaching a wild, injured animal, too scared to know the difference between danger and rescue. "Hey, Nora," he said softly. His voice wasn't booming or full of emotions that might overwhelm her. It was steady, quiet, calm, the kind of voice children instinctively trust. He sat in the chair beside her bed, not too close, not too far, just near enough to let her know he wasn't leaving. Her small body leaned back into the pillows instinctively, trying to make herself smaller. Elias's chest tightened. "Are you in pain?" he asked gently. Nora shook her head slowly. "Are you scared?" She nodded. Elias didn't move, didn't reach for her. He only matched her breathing slightly, creating a quiet rhythm she could follow. "Who are you scared of?" he asked. She didn't have to think. "Auntie," Nora whispered. Elias's jaw flexed, not in anger, but in the pain of seeing a child who still blamed herself for being terrified. "She can't hurt you anymore," he said. Nora shook her head quickly, panic flashing in her eyes. "She always finds me." Elias leaned forward, positioning himself within her eye line, grounding her. "No, Nora," he said firmly. "She won't find you again. She won't come near you. She's not allowed to. She's not able to." Nora stared at him, searching his face for lies. "You're not lying," she whispered. "I don't lie to children," he said. Her lower lip trembled. A small whimper escaped. She said I was the reason she had no money. She said I ruined her life. She said—" Elias shook his head slowly. "Nora," he said, voice breaking but controlled, "you didn't ruin anyone's life. You didn't break anything. You didn't cause anything." He paused. "You survived someone who didn't deserve you." Nora swallowed hard, as if those words were too big for her chest. The trauma counselor, a gentle middle-aged woman named Dr. Lively, stepped in quietly, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Ward," she said softly, "we need to discuss placement options. Tonight, before sunrise." Nora flinched again, shrinking down. Placement. That word hurt her more than anything else. Elias stood and stepped into the hallway with Dr. Lively, leaving the door cracked so Nora could still see him. Dr. Lively lowered her voice. "She needs stability. She needs someone she trusts. But emergency foster care might trigger a regression. She's in acute trauma shock." "I'm not letting her go with strangers tonight," Elias said. His voice wasn't loud, but it held steel. "Not after what she's been through." Dr. Lively hesitated. "Mr. Ward, you're not family." "No," Elias said, "but I'm the only person she reached for when she woke up." Dr. Lively glanced through the doorway. Nora was watching Elias with wide, terrified eyes, as if he were the last solid thing in a world crumbling beneath her feet. "All right," Dr. Lively said quietly. "We can approve temporary protective placement with you until the court hearing." Elias nodded once. "Thanked you." He returned to the bed. Nora looked up immediately, gripping the blanket like a lifeline. "Are they taking me?" she asked, voice cracking. "No," Elias said softly. "You're coming with me." Nora blinked, once, twice, then her face crumpled. She reached out with tiny trembling arms, not for the blanket, not for the rabbit, but for him. Elias exhaled shakily and lifted her gently into his arms. She fit against him like a small, terrified shadow. She buried her face in his chest. "Please don't let her come back," she whispered. His hand rested on her back, steady, protective. "She won't," he murmured. "I promise." Nora trembled. "Will you stay?" she asked. "For as long as you need me," he said. And for the first time since she had been dragged away from the motel, Nora let herself breathe, just a little. Just enough to fall asleep against the man who tore down a monster's world, just to give a child back her own. The courthouse smelled of old wood, coffee, and tension. Nora clung to Elias's coat sleeve as they entered through the side entrance, escorted by CPS officers who flanked them like silent guardians. Her steps were tiny, hesitant. Her new shoes squeaked against the polished floor. Her eyes stayed low, avoiding strangers' gazes. Elias matched her pace, never forcing her forward. He had been to courtrooms hundreds of times, Business disputes, legal settlements, foundation hearings, but nothing had prepared him for this. For the look in Nora's eyes, for the weight of what she had survived, for the rage that simmered every time he saw Ramona's face on a legal document. Today was the trial. Today, the truth would finally be spoken aloud. Inside the courtroom, reporters whispered behind raised notebooks. A handful of spectators watched with curiosity, not understanding the gravity of the nightmare this little girl had escaped. Ramona Hayes was escorted in between two deputies. Her wrists were cuffed, but her chin was high, arrogance still intact. She looked around the room with an expression that hovered between boredom and annoyance. Elias felt Nora tremble beside him. He knelt down. "Nora, you don't have to look at her. Look at me." She nodded quickly and buried her face in his sleeve again. Ramona laughed softly when she noticed. "Oh, please," she said loudly. "The theatrics." She always acted scared for attention. Elias's jaw locked. The judge banged the gavel. "Ms. Hayes, you will remain silent unless addressed." Ramona rolled her eyes. The State versus Ramona Hayes began. The prosecutor opened with a calm but icy tone. 6-year-old Nora Hayes did not wander into danger. She was delivered into it by the person entrusted with keeping her safe. Ramona snorted. "I did my best." Elias closed his eyes briefly, holding back a storm. The prosecution called the first witness, the motel owner. He described how Ramona rented room 8, brought Nora in, then met with the man later identified as Frank Moss, a known trafficker. Next came the forensic analyst, who presented fingerprints on the forged guardianship paper, confirming Ramona created it. There was video footage of her counting the money in the parking lot. And then the detective played a clip, audio from Ramona's sting operation confession. "Kids are replaceable. There are always more. I can get another in 4 days." The courtroom went silent. Someone in the gallery gasped. A reporter dropped his pen. Ramona didn't flinch. She only sighed. "Everyone's acting like I said something insane," she muttered. "It's just reality." The judge's knuckles whitened around her gavel. "Continue," she ordered. Then came Frank Moss. He entered with 2 guards, chains clinking. He didn't bother hiding his crimes. "She sold the kid willingly," he said. "Said the little brat wasn't worth her trouble." Nora whimpered, tiny fingers curling tighter into Elias's coat. Frank continued. "She even said if I liked her, she had a cousin's child she could get next." Elias saw red. Ramona exploded in outrage. "Liar, I never said, this is ridiculous." The prosecutor raised a hand. "Ms. Hayes, do you deny we have audio of you saying exactly that?" Ramona froze. The courtroom waited for her answer. She swallowed. I was manipulated." The jury was unmoved. Then came the hardest moment. Nora had to testify. A child advocate walked her to the stand, placing a stuffed penguin beside her. Her legs didn't reach the floor. She stared at the judge, then at the microphone, her little hands trembling. The prosecutor approached slowly. "Sweetheart, you can talk very quietly if you want. We will all hear you." Nora nodded timidly. "Do you remember what your aunt told you the night she took you to the motel?" Nora swallowed hard. She said I made her tired, that I ruined everything." Ramona scoffed loudly. "Oh, come on." The judge slammed the gavel. "One more outburst and you will be removed, Ms. Hayes." Nora's chin quivered. She said, "The man would take care of me better than she ever could. She said I wasn't worth keeping." Elias's heart broke. Ramona screamed, "I never said that." The judge signaled to security. "Remove her." 2 deputies seized Ramona as she thrashed violently. "You're all brainwashed. She's manipulating you. She's a liar. I didn't do anything wrong." Nora covered her ears, sobbing. Elias rushed to her side, ignoring courtroom protocol, wrapping an arm around her shoulders as she trembled. "It's okay," he whispered. "She can't touch you ever again." Ramona was dragged out kicking and screaming. Her voice echoed down the hallway. "I was the only one who cared for her. You should be thanking me." No one thanked her. The verdict took only 30 minutes. The jury returned, somber. "We find the defendant guilty on all charges." Nora pressed her face into Elias's chest and let out a shaky exhale. the sound of a child finally allowed to breathe. Ramona was sentenced to decades in federal prison. Frank Moss received additional years after confessing to multiple counts. When it was over, the judge looked at Elias. "Mr. Ward, thank you for what you've done for this child." Elias nodded once, humbly. But inside, he knew the truth. He hadn't saved Nora. Nora had saved herself. She survived long enough for someone to hear her. And Elias had answered. The world felt different after the verdict. Quieter, softer, safer. Nora walked out of the courthouse holding Elias's hand, not tightly, not desperately, but with the cautious trust of a child who was finally learning what it meant to feel protected. CPS escorted them to a private room for final instructions, paperwork, and the temporary custody transition. Nora sat beside Elias on a small sofa, swinging her feet gently. She stared at the floor, then at him, then back at the floor, as if trying to convince herself he wasn't going to disappear. The CPS worker smiled. "Mr. Ward, until the long-term hearing, you'll be her temporary guardian. She'll stay with you. She'll attend therapy twice a week. We'll check in often." Nora's head snapped up. "She's coming with me?" Elias asked softly. Nora's voice was tiny. "I can stay with you?" Elias turned to her fully. "If you want to." She nodded fast, so fast she nearly lost balance. Yes, please." The CPS worker closed the file. Then it settled. For the first time since the motel, Nora smiled. A small, trembling smile, but real. Elias's home was warm in a way hospitals and courtrooms couldn't be. Soft lamps, thick carpets, a fireplace crackling low. Nora stood inside the entryway, unsure what to do with a house this quiet and clean. "You can look around," Elias said gently. She wandered, touching nothing, soaking in everything. She stopped at a bookshelf, tracing titles with her fingers. Then she spotted something on the coffee table. Her stuffed rabbit. Clean. Brushed. Sewed. Sitting upright as though it had been waiting for her. Her breath caught. "You fixed him?" "I did," Elias said. "He was brave. He deserved a second chance." Nora picked it up, hugging it tightly, her small body relaxing for the first time in days. That night, Elias tucked her into a guest bedroom. She hesitated before he could leave. Will you stay until I fall asleep?" Elias pulled up a chair beside the bed. "Of course." Nora rested her head on the pillow, staring at him with heavy eyes. "Are you going to leave in the morning?" she whispered. "No," Elias said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." Her eyelids fluttered. She fought sleep, fear still clinging to her, but eventually her little body gave in. She fell asleep holding the stuffed rabbit, one hand reaching toward the edge of the bed where Elias sat. He stayed there long after she slept, watching her breathe, protecting her from shadows, nightmares, memories. When the therapist came the next morning, Nora whispered something that made the woman tear up. "He found me in the dark, and he didn't leave." Later that afternoon, they sat on the porch steps. Nora leaned her head against Elias's arm, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "Elias?" she murmured. "Yes?" "Am I safe now?" He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Yes, sweetheart," he said. "You're safe, and you're home." Nora closed her eyes, breathing in the warmth of a world that finally belonged to her again. And for the first time, she believed it.